must be something in the water that makes us turn.
I want girls like me to know that they can heal. I want them to know that nothing in their future looks like their past. I want them to know that as long as they're willing to do the work, it gets better. Let's talk about daddy issues, guys. So a few weeks back, I saw a reel that read, "Stop looking for your father's validation in broken men. You are hurting yourself." And it literally felt like an alarm went out in my head, because the me of a year ago, the me of 2 years ago, could relate so much. When we talk about daddy issues, for me, it's not just a catchphrase, it's actually a lived experience. And more often than not, I think a lot more people than we realize actually can relate to experiencing daddy issues, and a couple of the things I'm going to be sharing in this video. So this is a good time to subscribe if you're not. If you're new, thank you so much for coming through. It means a lot to me that you did. Don't make this your last time seeing this beautiful face. Click subscribe right now. Without further ado, let's jump right into the video. What is daddy issues? Daddy issues is an emotional disorder that causes adults to always find themselves in dysfunctional, complex, and disorganized relationships with members of their opposite sex, or like with people basically. And daddy issues can manifest themselves in various forms: being overly dependent, self-esteem issues, not trusting people. It can also manifest itself as being attracted to older people romantically. It can be a lot of things actually. For each individual, it manifests in various forms. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't know: daddy issue is not a standalone. Daddy issues, or the dadless girls or fatherless daughter syndrome, is as a result of something, and that something is called attachment and attachment style. What is attachment or attachment style? It is basically how we connect with others in every setting we find ourselves. Basically how we show up in our relationships, in our friendships, and all of that. Our style of showing up or being committed to people around us. And basically in psychology, there are like 4 various forms of attachment style. We've got the secured attachment style, which is basically the singularly positive, 100% positive attachment style. We've got, so I'm just going to list them out and then try to just explain them in my own words. We've got the avoidant attachment style, we've got the anxious attachment style, and we've got the disorganized attachment style, which is the combination of both avoidant and anxious attachment style. So what is the secured attachment style? Let's start with that. Let's start with the good first before we get into the elephant of the room. The secured attachment styles are people who are confident, who are able to connect with people naturally, who don't spend time in their head questioning their worth or all of that. Being a person who is securely attached can be as a result of, or maybe you grew up in a very secured environment where your needs for affection as a child was validated, and your primary caregivers, which could have been your parents or adults in your life, could see you, made you feel seen, and all of that. It means that you were emotionally provided for growing up, and this emotional cushion which we are given as a child will lead you to be a secured individual that shows up secured in every situation you find yourself. Another way to be securely attached is actually to do the work, and that's going to be the end of this video, but let's just keep going. So basically, the anxious attachment style explains people who are overly possessive, overly clingy, people who get jealous when they see their friends or anyone who is remotely supposed to be their person with someone else, people who overthink, who feel like it's their fault when things go wrong in a group or in a connection or anything like that. Moving on to the avoidant attachment style. This basically explains people who have a hard time connecting with people, so they basically overthink things, and they literally can say how somebody can hurt them. You've met them today and they can already tell how this person is going to hurt them and whatnot. These guys have like a sort of bubble around them. No matter how much close you get to them, you never really, you might have an illusion of you being close to them, but you are never actually close to them. They have a hard time forming any sort of real life relationship or very deep and meaningful relationship. It's not just their thing at all, and this can be as a result of maybe their parents or their primary caregivers were not present in their life, and they grew up to be independent. They grew up to fix themselves. They grew up to feel to make themselves feel seen by themselves. The fourth attachment style is the disorganized attachment style. So there are times where people manifest both the anxious and avoidant attachment style. This used to be my domain, the disorganized attachment style. So I used to oscillate between being anxiously attached or being avoidantly attached, depending on who or what the situation is. So if I see that a person has a tendency to maybe leave or break my heart or hurt me, I become avoidantly attached. I don't bother to create any connection. If I see that this person is open, warm, and the person is emotionally available, I become anxiously attached. But that's now in the past. So now that we've figured out all of this, let's tie it down to daddy issues. So basically, we see how the absence or the negligence of a father or primary caregiver can cause issues in the way we show up in the world, and this can now be the reason why we'll have self-esteem issues, why we'll have self-image issues, why we'll constantly chase after the illusion of what we think we've missed out on. Yeah, so how did I get out of this, you might ask? I'm going to be sharing 4 basic things that I did or I'm still doing at the moment to move from being that person who has daddy issues, who has attachment issues, to become a secured person or somebody who has healthy attachment. The first thing I did was to know myself. I had to take time to figure out, okay, why am I like this? Why am I not the same with everybody? Why am I very possessive of some people, and then with some people I just never try because what am I running away from? What is it? So I took time to learn myself. I figured out my pattern. Many times in the past, my pattern used to be I used to want to be the first to leave because I didn't want to be heartbroken. So in a case where if I feel like a friendship or a relationship is on the bricks of falling apart, I want to be the first to say I'm done here and all of that. I figured out my pattern. I figured out my triggers. The next thing I did was I figured out my loophole. So where did this dysfunction start from? And I was able to find out that the dysfunction started from the demise of my dad. After I figured out where this loophole started from, the next thing I did was to try to get to know my father. And luckily for me, it wasn't something that I consciously planned. It was something that fell on my laps, if I can put it that way. I started to read my dad's books, and in my dad's book I would see things that I wrote. I would see the kind of man that he was, and I just literally like understood his mind frame, and I was able to really see that, okay, he wasn't present not because he's not a good person. He wasn't present because life happened. I mean, he passed. In an alternative reality, maybe maybe your father is alive, or or your primary caregiver is alive, but somehow they were not just there when you needed them. You want to figure out the peculiarities around the situation. Why were they absent? Were they manifesting a generational thing? Like, were they also did they feel unloved as a child? How did they grow up? What is their reality like? What's their mind space? So in case of my dad, I was able to forgive the fact that he didn't plan to leave. That happened. And in case of my mom, I was also able to understand that she had to be at work. She had to do things so that we would have the privilege and the kind of life we have now. To figure out learning, get to know your father, your mother, whoever your primary caregiver is. Understand their own story, their own journey, why they acted the way they did. And the next thing I did was refathering myself. So now you've learned yourself, you've learned your pattern, you've also gotten to know your father or whoever the person is in the picture. You also now you want to figure out what are those things you missed, or those things that you wish they did for you. For some people it could be affirmations. In my case, I received love by words of affirmation, so I started to really affirm myself. I would I'd always I started affirming myself, started writing things to myself, started reminding myself of how proud I am of myself and all of that. So you're basically going to be refathering yourself or remothering yourself. And the next thing to do is to attempt therapy. Also, something that's also an option. So, in my case, I did go to therapy a couple of times, and I figured that, well, even with therapy, you will still have to do a bulk of the work. So maybe it's just easy for me to maybe read books, watch videos like this one that I'm sitting to film, and understand why I act the way I do and do the work that is involved. Last but not the least, last but not the least thing that I did was to connect more with God. So for the longest, I couldn't connect with God as a dad because that was the missing piece of my life. If you're a Christian, please go to God with these things. So the Bible says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Emotional baggages is so hard, and you need a place to let it out. And trust me, you might go to the gym, good place to let it out. You might maybe invest in healthy relationship, good place to let it out. But there's somebody who can bear your burdens technically. In my case, I remember for the longest I couldn't connect with God as a dad because I didn't know what that felt like. But I knew him as a friend. As I started to talk to God about the father, I feel hurt about the absence of my father. And I wish I did have a present father. And day by day, it started to get better. Right now, I am very much in a father daughter relationship with God, which is really beautiful. I recommend. So, yeah, those are my tips. I hope this helped you. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.